Welcome to this week's edition of Blacklisted Radio. My name is Doug Owen, and I am your host. My website is blacklistednews.com. I'm the senior editor and the publisher. You can also follow me on Twitter at BLN Radio Updates, and all of the things that you need to be part of the show you can find at blacklistedradio.com. Today we're going to start the conversation with what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri. Of course, there are few victims in this story, and I don't mean to be so provocative, but when you look at what's happening, it's hard to find a lot of people other than property owners and those in the media that are being accosted by police and those that are participating in the protests that are really victims in all of this. Now, I think that there are a lot of victims, but people do make decisions. And when you make bad decisions like looting stores or following Fed provocateurs or the Black Panthers or Reverend Jesse Jackson or any of these tragedy pimps like Al Sharpton and others out there that are trying to project their memes and trying to become celebrities and national figures by covering these events. The media aspect and, of course, the alt media, independent media aspect of this story is interesting. It is, I think, the best covered rioting that we have had to date. And that's not to say it's a good thing, but the coverage is much better than we've had in the past because we do have so many independent journalists out there. This is interesting because the question becomes who's a journalist, and now that the Missouri police and those they're now controlled by the FBI, who have ostensibly taken over the operation and are now steering police according to multiple sources, Washington Post and AP and others have reported. So who's actually in charge? I mean, that's a grand question, but I think everybody's doing a pretty horrible job. The man that sparked this, Michael Brown, far from a victim. I have almost no remorse for a person that would strong arm a Middle Eastern shop owner for a cigar. I mean, that's it's not something like petty theft or shoplifting. It's malicious, and you know where that goes. I mean, people that are willing to beat up others over 35-cent cigars. I mean, just the worst of the worst, cheapest thing. I mean, you can buy them for next to nothing. Probably not a victim. And I know some of you out there are perpetual consummate victims and often email me. We have to feel bad for these people. I don't feel bad for people that commit crimes, not only against their neighbors and businesses in their neighborhoods, but one another because of something that is unrelated to their personal lives. And I think it's, of course, really misdirected. So there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. One of them is it's too damn hot. I've coined it before, the summer of rage. It's August. It is miserably hot, and we know that the crime rate and general agitation of human beings goes way up. Animals attack more when hot. It's just science. So that would be one of many reasons why people are so upset. Some of them, of course, are grieving in a lot of other ways and want to bring attention to other injustices through this event. And others are just opportunists, people that are grabbing the mic, the tragedy pimps, the aforementioned folks that are working with the police departments to subjugate and to COINTELPRO some of the protesters on the ground. And, of course, infiltration of these movements is very important. Just going back to the Occupy protest, which did turn violent, and most of that was provocateured by state agents. In retrospect, we've seen some of the people like the NATO 5 or the NATO 3 rather, a group of men, we'll call them that, would be ne'er-do-wells working with the feds to throw Molotov cocktails. I mean, some of those things, those highlights and recent history cannot be forgotten when looking at what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri today. And of course, just like, Kent State, we now know that the police shot first. I'm sure if there is the forensics that is conducted in the interest in the future, we're going to find a lot of those instances. Of course, the police are not victims in any of this. The institution of curfews and trying to round up people rather than just protecting property has only exacerbated the situation. And now the response is so overwhelming. And there are now so many other dynamics. You have people from out of town coming in to rape, rob, and loot. According to the media, I don't know how much of that's actually true. Probably very little, considering the source. But watching some of the media coverage, Chris Hayes getting rocks thrown at him, not to mention all of the media people that have been arrested, Reuters, photographers, Olson. There's a lot of people, probably upwards of 50, maybe even 100 at this point, that have been arrested in the media. So that's kind of unprecedented. But the police know who they have to watch out for. The media is doing a good job demonizing the police in this situation, and it's pretty easy to do. It has brought light to programs like the 1033 program, actually instituted back during the Reagan era under the National Defense Authorization Act. Think of 1987. Don't quote me on that, but right there around that point. And the original NDAA, before the one that stripped would-be terrorists of their, or whoever the state deems as a terrorist. I mean, that is about as arbitrary and subjective as you could imagine what that label means. I don't want to go into a diatribe, but Awalaki, rabble rouser, but not somebody that had orchestrated an imminent attack against the United States. Without his assassination, that we would have had, a weapon of mass destruction going off on U.S. soil. So when you look at NDAA throughout the years, I mean, I think we can all say that if you're a peacemonger like myself, that they've all been pretty bad, and they've snuck a lot of things through and used a lot of money that has ended up militarizing the police forces across the U.S. So that's being highlighted. Now they're rethinking this. And a lot of it is even beyond the militarization. I've pointed to the privatization of these paramilitary forces and the rise of the warrior cop and how that transformed police departments across the nation. There's great documentaries. There's lots of people that have highlighted this. And if you, like I, live in a somewhat urban area, you might have noticed that your local police department's wearing camouflage. They're running around with APC vehicles. And this is all thanks to, of course, the drug war and the reclassification of what drug operations were. So, I mean, a lot of this kind of goes back to the drug war and how that was used against minorities, primarily. Because when you look at rich lawyers and politicians that do cocaine, musicians, they rarely have to pay much of a price for that, and that's because they have money, prestige, and they're the political elite. And I'm so sick of white privilege, another meme that has to die soon, and I just can't wait till it's run its course. White privilege. I look at a lot of the protesters, and this might be provocative, but they're unemployable. I mean, if you don't care about yourself and your appearance at all, and you don't conduct yourself or hold yourself with any kind of dignity, nobody else will value you. And it has nothing to do with you being a victim. It has everything to do, or being black or a minority. It has everything to do with people judging others based on their outward appearance. And I don't care if you're a white guy with tattoos on your face. If you've got spider webs and teardrop tattoos on your head and your neck, you might have a hard time getting a job at a funeral home. I don't know. I mean, insert whatever ridiculous scenario it is, and it doesn't matter. Or maybe if you have dreadlocks down to your, butt that you haven't washed in, 5 years. Whatever situation, it's not really your race or even the socioeconomics of the situation. It's just you're unemployable. And that's what, when we look at the people that are in the streets out here, I mean, the kind of people that throw rocks and wear bandanas and, try their best to firebomb cops are either complete idiots, and there's some of those for sure, easily put into groupthink and brought along for the ride by whoever may be steering the assault on police officers, which now have smartly, I would say, taken their names off of their uniforms because they don't want any accountability. And though they've been this is one of the things that was weird, is that you had the Missouri police, the Ferguson police, signing this declaration not to attack the media. The media has been the big focus of this, and of course, they have done just that under the direction, once again, of the FBI. So we have all these people being basically subjected to sound cannons, flashbangs, tear gas, drone surveillance, biometric surveillance. You can bet your sweet bippy if they're monitoring people at a Boston. And if you didn't hear about the story, there's a big story about this secret biofacial recognition system that they were using to monitor people at concerts in Boston. And this is just, collating and creating, huge biometric databases for the police departments to share with the feds and whoever else has access to these, huge privately controlled databases, fusion centers, all of that stuff. So if you don't think that that's being deployed right now in Ferguson, then you have to think that this is not a big deal. It is a big deal if Barack Obama will stop his 2-week vacation to actually comment on what's happening there. And that means it's a national issue. It's not just another day in the hood, we could say. Eric Holder has been dispatched, which I think is pretty ironic. Maybe some of you do as well, considering that I would place a lot of the blame for what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri, solely on and squarely on the shoulders of Mr. Eric Holder. So the terrible handling of the economic crisis is one of the underlying reasons why we have the economic disparages in this country, and why you have so many people that are living in blight. And Washington's blog did a pretty good analysis on this and noted that economists Hans Joachim, or Joachim maybe, Vuth, and I'm totally mangling this, Jacopo Ponticelli show that from 1919 to the present, austerity leads to violence and instability. And that's what you have when you have socialism for the rich, socialism for Wall Street, and a free market capitalist system for all of the poor people or the little people. So one of the things that it's noted is that between 1919 and 2009, if you look at the cuts and expenditure cutbacks and some of the things that are leading to what we see today, I mean, there's been a huge decrease in the benefits for the food programs. And a lot of these, especially in red states like Missouri, have been chopped. And so people are, living with less. Yeah, especially those people that are the type that would riot and that are, that are part of the class of people that are now expanding to more and more neighborhoods across the world, really. but the United States especially, that just do not have a future and do not have a stake in what we have today. If you're not a stakeholder, then you're the kind of person that doesn't mind destroying other people's private property for, I don't know, economic justice, for civil rights, for better treatment, because that's what happens with a lot of these movements like Occupy. Not that I wasn't a fan of what it did and what it represented. I think it brings, just like this situation, a lot of clarity to what's happening. And unfortunately, it takes social disobedience to bring any light to some of these disparages. So people like myself at least can do a little bit of justice to the situation by talking about it. But I mean, we saw with Occupy planned assassinations by the FBI and the Houston Police Department. David Lindorf actually did a great piece for Who, What, Why. You can find it at blacklistednews.com. It's all over the web, actually. Portion of this we clip from Washington's blog, but it highlights the snipers that are always present and the plans for the assassination of the aforementioned Occupy leaders. This is an ongoing FOIA request snafu that David has been going back and forth with, but what he's revealed through FOIA requests has been nothing short of riveting. And of course, this isn't something that is widely known, but the contingency plan for these things to get out of control and what the government may or may not do in these kind of situations. I mean, that is the scariest aspect of this, is that things like this can quickly get out of control, and you do feel bad for the people that are innocent victims. Obviously, there are some of those, not many, but there are some of the people that are there that just happen to be in the way of this. And those are the people that are often caught off guard and stuck. Those are the people that usually end up taking the brunt of an impact of some of these situations. People that are just innocent bystanders. So another case in point, and something that is not going to be talked about much, is that you have Wells Fargo and Chase Manhattan that purposely went after minorities, specifically black people, and gave them subprime loans and bet against these people. They also gave them higher interest rates. So when you look at some of the players, some of the people that Eric Holder should have went after, and that's why I mentioned it's ironic and how much he and the Justice Department could have done to bring real justice, not faux justice, not whatever he's bringing to Ferguson, but actual meaningful change, would be through going after these banks that are too big to fail. And I don't want one of these. We went after Bank of America and we got $31 billion, or what was it, $16 billion? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It might have cut into some of the profits, but we're talking about drips in a bucket here. And obviously the victims, the restitution, the fixing of people's credit records, and all of those things that really were the larger impact. Those are the things you can't escape. You might be able to escape debt, but it's really hard to escape your credit rating, the mark of the beast. So these are some of the people that I think that we should be focusing more on. I mean, obviously, the people that are in the streets, I mean, the reason that they're there is because they have no future plans. Here's a pretty scary statistic, but kind of shows us how the decisions that are being made today will affect the outcome of the future tomorrow. It's a great saying. The recent history is most likely to predict the recent future, the near future, rather. So 36% of Americans haven't saved anything for retirement. Over 1/3 of Americans have not saved a penny for their retirement, according to a new Bankrate.com report. 69% of 18 to 29-year-olds haven't saved anything, along with 33% of the 30 to 49-year-olds, 26% of 50 to 60-year-olds, and 14% of the 65 and older demographic. So what does that mean? That means that people are not forward thinking, and if they are cashing out their IRAs. They're trying to take some money back that they may have in investments or maybe in home equity and put it into something. But, those avenues and the returns on Wall Street and putting your money back into that system, probably not a great idea. And a lot of people are very wary, and that's how they lost their money. And when you look at what has led to the decline in perceived wealth, it's home value losses, because so many people, especially those not so much that are protesting in Ferguson, but the middle class and other business owners that would be providing jobs and would create more economic opportunities in communities like Ferguson and many other places around the U.S. that are have huge demographics of a poor population. I did see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a famous basketball player for all of you across the pond and down to the south that are unfamiliar, made comments, because I think that a lot of folks see this as the race baiting as this future war between classes and possibly the beginning of a race war. And he said, well, this isn't a race war. This is an economic war. This is all about the economy. And I agree with him 100%. My next door neighbor, very nice lady, and her family are all African American, black people that live next to me. Not that means anything. Oh, good for you, Doug. You live next to black people. That's not the angle that I'm going for here. But she stopped and talked to me yesterday because our other next door neighbor is getting a new roof put on his house, and asked me if the noise was driving my wife and my son nuts. And I said, well, she wasn't here today, but I'm sure it would have. And she's like, oh, I just can't wait for these people to get out of here, and I hope they get it done today because they are driving my kids crazy. Yeah, we had a little chit chat, and point being, there was no racial tension. She didn't want to, we didn't even think about it. And if you go talk to most people that haven't had their eyes outside of Ferguson glued to the TV, the news hounds like myself, you'll realize, I think, that most people, if they're not, that there's no perceived injustice, or they're doing pretty well and they've got food in their mouths, they're not going to riot. Just not going to happen, because you have something to look forward to. But more and more Americans do not. More and more people feel, as I think many in Ferguson, that the only way to affect change in a system that absolutely does not represent you is to act violently and to resist violently. And there's precedent for that. There really is. And so I understand why people feel like that. I mean, if you look at, recently deceased, I think, terrorist, Mr. Nelson Mandela, by all accounts and by all definitions, used violence to bring attention and to overthrow apartheid. Now, we can get into a huge discussion, but his wife Winnie thought that it was appropriate to put gasoline in tires and put those tires over people's necks and set them on fire and burn their faces off. Now, if you think that that's reasonable because of your political strife, or that that justifies ridding yourself of oppression, you're probably a radical. But Obama likes people like that. I mean, Bill Ayers, perfect example. Guy planned on bombing the Pentagon, and he's teaching classes. He's a friend of Obama. So, I mean, the whole dichotomy here, and how there is this very thin line between terrorists and patriots, and those that are justly using violence against the state, or those who believe they're justly using violence to support the state, i.e. police officers, i.e. state troopers, and all of the rest that are descending on the population to institute martial law against the people there, then believe they have the right to peacefully assemble. Although you can't peacefully assemble alongside lots of people throwing Molotov cocktails, and you're not going to affect political change by burning down cities. That is not going to. That's going to probably put a lot of small businesses that provide jobs out of business, uninsured businesses that can't cope. That is going to further hurt your own community. So I would like to see a lot more of these people that are so vocal about the injustices focus on those that have really done these people wrong, and that is the Chase Manhattans and others out there. But it amazes me that so much focus is put on the response of the police department and the response of the protesters, and none of the responsibility is put on the economic aspect of it. So I think there is, but it's always pushed onto race and some of the other people that have attached it. I mean, at some point we're going to see this blamed on climate change. Like it, love climate change, believe in it, anthropomorphic human climate change, or global warming, or staunchly against it. I promise you, they're going to be peer-reviewed at some point, studies that prove all of this is because of climate change. So I think that's really one of the larger tragedies in all of this, is how many people attach themselves to this incident. One of the things that's not being talked about when it comes to things that really do affect us all, the U.S. Federal Reserve, under the cover of everything that's happening from ISIS attacking the dam in Mosul to social unrest, a state of emergency in Ferguson, is that they are now planning bank bail-ins, something that seemed unheard of, like negative interest rates and all of the other things that are happening in the Eurozone that we can't cover today in this program, but are just, so revealing and so over the top. And the fact that they try their hardest, people like Barroso and others in the European central banking fascist faction, trying to convince us that this is good and this is, you want to pay banks to hold your money. You shouldn't get interest. Well, in a world where interest and rent seekers create wealth and create investments, and one of the investment arms up until the last few years for most Americans and Europeans, it's a hard pill to swallow. It makes almost no sense. It's probably just better to put your money in a safe or under your bed. Don't put it in the safety deposit boxes. But anyway, case in point, bank bail-ins are coming to the U.S. There was a pretty interesting speech in Stockholm, Sweden, and the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve and former bank governor of the Bank of Israel said, of course, we're talking about Stanley Fischer, quote, as part of this approach, the United States is preparing a proposal to require systemically important banks, the SIFIs, to issue bail-inable long-term debt that will enable insolvent banks to recapitalize themselves in resolution without calling on government funding. This cushion is known as gone concern buffer. So the government isn't going to do it, but these institutions will have a bail-in mechanism to where they will take the financial brunt and of this, which it seems like a great idea. When I read it, I'm like, well, that seems great. And they'll bail in each other when they fail. Because who's ultimately, or should be ultimately, the loser in a bad bank transaction? It should be the bank. usually the bank, the people taking the risk that are making money, they're the ones that assume the risk for the reward. It's like investing in, I don't know, QVC products or something. The Ginsu knife. I mean, if it sells, you're a multimillionaire. If it doesn't, you are broke once again. So anyway, this is a soft pedaling of this idea, and having the FDIC, which since 1933, interesting number, of course, has now up to $250,000 from $100,000 that they will insure. So the FDIC, this little triad, is trying to make banks repay these debts. And of course, if you're watching the derivatives markets explode into just this, just unimaginable amounts of leverage and volatility. It's amazing that more and more people aren't fearful of that. More people, unfortunately, and I think it's because of the perception, are fearful of their fellow Americans. They're fearful of people in their own neighborhoods doing things like attacking them because they have more money than them, or because they're a different color. And really, the people that are attacking us are the same ones that are making so much money for themselves. And it's not even that I don't believe that people should, have to pay for the mistakes they make. But that has to be accountability from the top right on down to the bottom. I saw this pretty damning statistic, and it said that banks in 2013, brought to me by my sister-in-law in idle conversation, and she said that $36 million in 2016 is what several banks were able to issue in fees and overdraft penalties. And if you really think about that, that is $36 million being taken from people who have no money. That's the reason they overdrafted their accounts. And that, my friends, really does put some lipstick on that pig, I think. And of course, the takeaway from all of this is that we have to have more long-term thinking. And unfortunately, it's all short-term. And here in Texas, where I live, it's all about Rick Perry's indictment and whether or not he's going to wear the glasses in his profiling picture. You talk about the political and even maybe white privilege. And I hate to use that term. I've already said it's a horrible buzzword. It's waiting for it to die. But watching that indictment, if you're outside of the country and you didn't see it, it's worth watching, because let me tell you, I've seen indictments. I've never seen cheerleaders at a courthouse cheering on an indictment. And this is kind of surreal. The fact that we have people cheering on the indictment and cheering Rick Perry, and he's giving a speech as he's being arrested, which wasn't much of an arrest. No handcuffs, no perp walk, no coat over his head, no shame. Of course, it's a PR push, but I find myself watching all of these political shows, and this one was the big one today, and the local media, even more so than what's happening in Ferguson, was focusing on this indictment against Rick Perry. And I could name so many other things, from forcing or trying to force Gardasil vaccines onto all of the teenage girls in Texas, and getting a kickback from Merck directly, and his staff taking on tens of thousands of dollars to push legislation that would make these vaccines part of the schedule. It's just one case in point. The cancer research funds, the fraud that the Public Integrity Unit that he was trying to defund was actually bringing to light. And it becomes this spectacle, and it's pretty sad, because there's so many crimes that even I am aware of that Rick Perry has committed. You would think it would be pretty easy to indict him on some of those, but this is all just partisan politics and a way to kind of smear a little doo-doo in his face right before his presidential run in 2016. But this is a big story, and it's a complete show. And anyway, that's our show. Thank you so much for being part of it. I know that it is truncated, but that is because I was out of the studio. I was out of the Blacklisted Radio studios this weekend to attend my sister's wedding. So I want to thank her for having me at her wedding and congratulate her, really, more than thank her and her new husband. And thus, I was indisposed Saturday morning. So we will be doing the Doomcast tomorrow. Doomcast number 50. Is it 55 or 54? I don't know. You'll have to tune in tomorrow, doomcast.com, to figure it out. Charlie McGrath is in Denver, Colorado, so we're going to talk to him about why he's there and get his perspective on all of these recent events. And I will do that tomorrow. And then, of course, Saturday we will have another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, all my friends out there, thank you so much for continuing to support this show. It's commercial-free. It's independent because you out there continue to support us. You can do that at blacklistedradio.com. We have a support page there. We also now accept Bitcoins, and they're falling in price, so there's no better time to use your BTCs to support the show. It's really cool. We're using BitPay. We have a new processor. Our first one, not a new one, but the first processor, which is very reputable and has over 20,000 clients and big Fortune 500 companies that are now accepting Bitcoin. So we're using BitPay. So there's some security in that. And so for you out there that want to do that and have continued to chastise us for not taking Bitcoins and have said that you would support the show, if we did, we now do. And we have Linux too, for the 10 of you that have constantly said, if you used Ubuntu, Doug, I could support you. We are Linux-based open source show. You can take the show, the branding, my likeness, any aspect of the show, chop it up, put it into videos. You can take it, expand upon it, commodify it, sell it. We're completely open source. If you do that, you make some scratch, and you can somehow in wealth yourself with that, or bring some value to your own life, then you can support it with us, and you can support us by sharing. So there you go. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, take care.